everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Lilia, Territory 3 Kiwi Landing Page Reimagined. We're a non-profit organisation with the goal of helping support New Zealand startup founders that are going global. And very excited today, we've got Tim Alpe, which I'd assume most people will have at least heard of you, or they would probably know about JUCY Rentals, JUCY Snooze, which is now Lylo, which is a super exciting new brand. And also you've got a new startup called comfy.co.nz. But yeah, super excited to kind of hear a bit about your story so far. So yeah, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, hey guys, great to be on board, and thanks for that the great introduction. It's funny. I refer to quite a lot of stuff as BC, before COVID, and before COVID, I got asked a lot to tell the story of JUCY and to speak at different events and different things, and I always said yes. It was a great way to grow the brand. It was a great way to, and I quite like telling the story, and so I always said yes. And after COVID, I kind of said no to most things and everything, only because it was probably a bit raw in terms of what we've been through and what's around the house. But when you asked, and you've been such a great supporter of our new business as well, how could I say no? So, and I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing, and I was a big fan of the Kiwi landing pad before you rebranded as well. So it's just great that I'm here today. So thank you. And look, what I thought I'd do today, I could tell you the story of JUCY and where we've come from, and sort of how we built the business and what we did. And I'm sure to all the founders and owners out there, that'll be really interesting, and there's lots of takeaways from that. But then really, I suppose it's really the last couple of years, which I think is actually the most interesting story to tell, really. I mean, you can read all about JUCY in terms of where we grew the business from, but actually it's what's happened over the last couple of years and how we've adapted and how we've got through, and some of the challenges and the mistakes and everything else we've made, which is probably more appropriate, especially for this audience, because like anything, you have ups and you have downs all the time. And so sometimes the downs are pretty bad, and sometimes the ups are fantastic. So I think for me, what I thought I'd do today is just give you really an oversight as to what really happened to us as a result and during COVID, and then how we kind of adapted our business, how the changes we had to do, and how we sort of got to where we are today, and where things are at with me personally and what we're doing, and some of the, I suppose, I hate the kind of word resilience, because I think everyone kind of uses it a bit too much. I like the word bounce, and so let's call this bounce for much of a better term, because it's kind of like when you go down and hit, you sort of bounce up again. So yeah, so if that works for you guys, that would be great. Love to hear questions, comments, anything like that. Nothing's off the table. I'm a pretty open book. I'll say it as it is. I won't get too emotional, but I'll definitely give you some insights into how we grew the business. So what I thought I might do is sort of take you back I suppose probably best to give you a little bit of history on JUCY as a business. So the business was started by my brother and I back in 2002. We started a small little garage out of Parnell in Auckland. We were 22 and 24 or something. Borrowed some money off the old, the traditional story, borrowed some money, bought a couple of cars off the hospital board, shitty old Daewoo cars, and started running the business, and really used technology and online to grow our business. And we painted everything green, these camper vans, and we sort of grew the business to, at its sort of peak, we were running about 4,000 vehicles across New Zealand, Australia, and the US. So we had locations across in cars and camper vans. We also had a cruise business in the Milford Sound called JUCY Cruise, which took people around. We had two big boats, took people around the Milford Sound. We launched a hotel pod business, which Lily just described before, when we had properties in Auckland, Christchurch, and Queenstown. We had about a staff, about 450, and we were probably doing in excess of around $120 million in revenue a year. So fast growing, had built up this big, significant business, but our major clientele and focus was the international market. So we had most of our clientele, 80% came from offshore, and we're a very seasonal business. So you make all your money over sort of 4 to 5 months, and the rest of the time you consolidate and just get through the winter. We did have a little bit of, by having a business in the US, it meant that we sort of got rid of the seasonality to a certain degree. But like all businesses, we made all our money over a short period of time in the tourism game. The trouble really started for us in 2019 in December. It was the middle of summer. We were going well. We were making money. And then the fires began, and we're quite a significant business in Australia, and Australia started burning. I don't know if you guys recall, it was a few years ago now, but Australia started burning and they closed all the east coast of Australia off, and we had all these cancellations. And that kind of was like, shit, that's a big impact on our Australian business. Then in January of that year, the massive floods in Milford Sound, and that closed our Milford Sound business for 4 months. So the road was washed out. So it was like, you're sort of looking around looking for locusts or something. You're like, and what's going on here? You had fire, floods, and that was a real nightmare. And then to cut it all, to top it all off, someone went and ate a bat in China, and then all the fun began. So it was a really interesting start to 2020. But when I really noticed it, what was going on, so we had these sort of things leading up to it. I was in Europe. I used to go to Europe 3 times a year. I went to a big trade show called ITB, which is a big trade show. And I started, when I was going around seeing some of our customers, I started getting this really weird feeling that some of them wouldn't meet with you. Some people wouldn't shake your hand. It was all masks. And I was like, this is strange. We hadn't really seen it in New Zealand, but I was like, this is a bit weird. So I kind of thought, oh shit, okay. And so I got back to New Zealand, and within, I think, 14 days of being back, they closed the borders, and overnight, 90% of our business stopped. So you go from 120 million in revenue, and literally 90% just stopped overnight. What was also bad is that we had a whole bunch of pre-booked business. So, when people book, especially the Germans and other Europeans, book well in advance, and a lot of people basically just cancelled. And so we not only do we have all these business cancellations, no revenue coming in, but we also had to pay a whole bunch of people out, a whole bunch of business that had been pre-booked. So to say it was an absolute cluster was a sort of a total understatement. So, we'd gone to this lockdown. We had, millions of dollars worth of cancellations, and we had 450 staff, and we had leases. I think we had 42 leases on properties. So you can imagine when you're a big business, you were playing. I remember looking at my risk assessment document that I had for our board meetings each month. I'm sure you guys have them as well. And I had everything. I had terrorist threat. I had, exchange rates. I had all this weather disasters, climatic disasters. I just never had a pandemic disaster which closed New Zealand off for 2 years from the world. So it was a nightmare. So what do we have to do? So, like anything in business, you've got to sort of adapt pretty quickly. And we adapted pretty quickly. So we had to exit staff. So we had to exit about 250 people over lockdown. So no, you couldn't see anyone, had to do it all over like we're talking now. It was all over Zoom. And that was a really horrific time to do that, and we were a really family oriented business. We were 100% family owned. We had great people who've been with us 15 years, like you guys all do in your businesses. And we had to exit them really, really quickly from the business. What was really cool though is, and I'll just add to this, is that we had to go through it. And I keep getting these phone calls from our guys, because it was a pretty emotional time. I keep getting these phone calls from our guys, and they were more concerned about how Dan and I were than they were for themselves. It was amazing. And we actually brought all the people that we let go back about 3 months later, because when you could actually go out again, we brought them back to do a sort of a farewell drink. And it was the most cathartic thing ever, because you could find that they were all okay. Some had gone off different jobs, some had started studying, some had taken some time off for family, but they were actually all okay. So that was, again, culture within a business is so critical, especially when times are tough, like it was going through that. But we reduced staff. We had to exit out of a lot of locations. So there was a lot of negotiation with landlords, which is really, really tricky, and you can imagine really tricky. And then we had to sell property. So it was like all these things we had to do to urgently cut. And all in the middle of this is all over lockdown, where you can't see anyone. And then to top it all off, which is where I sort of thought, we had the fires, we had the fires, floods, we had the COVID, and then in the middle of level 4 lockdown in Auckland, a group of people decided to break into our storage yard and steal 98 vehicles from us right in the middle of level 4 lockdown. So you can imagine that we do have the title for the largest car theft ever in New Zealand over level 4. So that's kind of I don't know if it's a title you really want, but that was, we recovered 92 vehicles, but the whole thing cost us about $500,000 that we just didn't have. So yeah, it was pretty, and at the same time having to front all of this with our suppliers and the agents and customers, and also with the bank. And so we had always run the business. We were profitable pretty much from day one. We had to be profitable. We didn't have the ability not to. We had to grow based on either retained earnings or bank debt. And look, we'd borrowed a lot to build a lot. It's a capital intensive business. when you have 4,000 vehicles and boats and hotels, etc., you need a lot of capital, and it all works well when there's cash coming in. Not so great when the cash doesn't come in. So we had a good relationship with our bank. They were positive, but they were very nervous about what was going to happen. They were very nervous about tourism. The government was saying they're going, we're going to close the borders for up to 2 to 3 years. Everyone's panicking. So we were given the ultimatum that we had to go out there and raise capital. And we'd never done it before. The irony was the first time we'd ever done it, we sold half of our accommodation business to EVT, which is Event Hospitality. They have all the movie cinemas and QT Hotel and Ridges. We sold it to them about 6 weeks before lockdown, just by chance. So it was the first time we did raise capital. But we were told we had to go out there and basically raise capital to survive. So yeah, we did. And well, we went out there, and it was very clear very early on that it was going to be a very much a distressed raise, because primarily for the primary reason is we had no future revenue streams. It's very hard to sell something when you've got no future revenue coming in. And of course, we got a whole bunch of predatory sort of PE looking at the opportunity, which happens. But look, we actually ended up having about 4 interested private equity parties out of Australia. But there was the problem we had is we had a debt level here, and before COVID, we had an equity level up here, and now we had an equity level here. So, we had basically no equity in the business. So it was a really ugly, tough realization. But we also had to get through this thing. So we had four parties involved, and in the end, we decided to go. Well, I'll get onto that in terms of where we decided to get to. But over that period, it was as the leader of the business, as the CEO of the business, it was an incredibly tough period of time. I'd always sort of I've never been a very good sleeper, never have been. I don't really need to, and I always tend to wake up in the middle of the night and have all these ideas, probably a lot like you guys, and always had this sort of badge of honor that I only need a 4-hour sleep, I can get it through, and I could, but it wasn't probably wasn't the most intelligent thing to be doing. But I found that over this whole period and going through it, I found that I actually became incredibly emotional, which was really weird. And I'd do, I'd start, sounds so I say it now, but I started doing stupid things like I'd watch I'd turn the TV on the block television program, or one of those ones, and I'd start crying. I was like, mate, you're really in trouble now, right? Start doing this stuff, because a lot of the stuff was, you're dealing with all the shit coming at you. You didn't know the future. You didn't know what was happening. You had family, you had friends, you had all this stuff going on. And even though you have a support mechanism, it's a very bloody lonely place being an entrepreneur, and you guys will know it better than me as well. So it's really, really hard to do that. So I thought, well, how am I going to get through this? And I had to be the one to actually keep standing, because if I didn't keep standing, the whole house of cards would fall over. So I started doing a few things for me personally. I started writing a lot. I wrote a lot on social media. I wrote a lot on LinkedIn. I found that really cathartic. I found it was an opportunity for me to sort of voice what I was going through. I decided to be brutally honest. It was kind of in my DNA anyway. I just tell it as it is. I tell the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that was really good. I decided, I tried to exercise, tried to get out and do, just to try to clear the head. And look, and it was working, but it wasn't working well enough. I was then persuaded by my wife to go, and she goes, oh, you need to go see someone. I was like, oh, man, I don't need to do that. Your typical Kiwi response, male response. I don't need to do that. But I did in the end take her advice, and I went and saw someone, and this was right in the middle of all this shit going on, this craziness going on. And I went and saw someone, and it was really funny because I walked into this head doctor case, and I thought, oh, this is going to be my Sopranos moment. I'll be lying on the couch and having this conversation. And it was and I got there, and the person looked at me, and I said, oh, they said, what do you do? And I said, oh, I've got this business called JUCY. And the lady was like, oh, is that like a juice company or something? And I was like, oh, this is perfect. She has no idea what we do, who we are, what we're going through. And it was probably the best thing I ever did. There was no vested interest. She just wanted to make sure that I could get through this. And it was really, as I said, it was incredibly cathartic to go through that. She then decided that I should start popping some pills. And I thought, oh God, I can't go down that track as well. So next minute I'm popping happy pills. But I did. And actually, because the relationship was, for me, I was like, you do whatever you need to do get through whatever you're going through. So I did. So I started to pop a few pills, and lo and behold, things started to get a little bit brighter, and things started happening. And that was kind of the biggest learning for me in terms of going through that really, really tough period was that, you do whatever you need to do to get through. And the other thing I said to you before, I was being really brutally honest with everyone, and including our staff. So I basically I said it how it was. This is what we were going through. And that was, again, a really challenging, difficult thing to do. We would have every week in our business, we called it the Bro Show. My brother and I would do a sort of a YouTube show to all of our crew around the world, telling them all about what's going on, what the new things are happening, what the old things are happening. But we keep doing that over that period, and we were just brutally honest. We said, look, guys, we don't know. We could be here tomorrow. We might not be here tomorrow. You may not be here tomorrow. But again, it was really, really important. I was also brutally honest with my family and friends. And it was funny, I remember saying to my wife, Amy, I said to her, I said, shit, my kids are, they were 16 and 13 and 10 or something at the time. I remember saying to her, look, do we need to sit down the kids and say, look, things are going to be a little bit different, right? I think we're in a different situation. Things are, and she said, no, we don't need to tell them anything, Tim. Don't need to say anything. They know. They're going through this exactly alongside you. They know. But again, it was this idea of being brutally honest, which was really good. So going through all of this, we had these 4 different private equity businesses there wanting to go. And then basically there was one party that the bank was more encouraging of us to go with. And again, this is another lesson to learn, right? When you start to lose control of the decisions that you make, and I knew this party that they were recommending wasn't the right party from a fit perspective. They wanted to break up the business, and they wanted to do everything else. But unfortunately, not necessarily all the control was sitting in our hands. And look, we could have probably fought it a little bit, but the risk was they might have just gone to hell with it and pulled the rug. So we had to go on that basis. And that's when I sat back to myself and said, can I really stay in this game, stay on this journey under this new environment, and making all these decisions in the middle of this craziest time when we're still dealing with no customers and everything else. So I made this really, really tough decision to step away from the business. And I made the decision really quickly, which is a good thing, but it was a really, really difficult one for me to do. And I had really mixed emotions because, this was my legacy. I've done this thing for nearly 20 years. We built this business from nothing to this incredible business. And all I was JUCY. I was Tim from JUCY. That's all I was. It's everyone ever knew me for. I'd gone and we'd won Entrepreneur of the Year awards. We'd done all this stuff. Traveled the world, and I was Tim from JUCY. And so to walk away was really, really difficult, but I knew it was the right decision for me. My brother Dan decided that wasn't the right decision for him, and he was going to stick on and he'd take up the role of CEO and under this new environment. And I really respected him for it. I couldn't do it, but I respected him for it. So I did it. But I remember when I was sort of leaving, it was just the weirdest thing. The hardest thing for me was packing up my JUCY gear. If anyone even knew me before when I was with JUCY, everything I wore was JUCYfied. Watches, glasses, everything I wore. In fact, I had no other clothes. So that was a really interesting period and I remember packing it all away, because once I did it, made the decision, I couldn't go back. So I packing it all away and did that. So I did that and I walked away. I took a deep breath, I reflected, and I said that I was going to take sort of 4 months off just to try to recover, I suppose is the best way to do it. And so I did. And I recovered, and I went and got on to what am I going to do next? And at the time, as I mentioned to you before, EVT had bought 50% of our business, our hotel business, which is a really, really cool product. And they said to me they would buy the other 50% because the third party that came in didn't necessarily want it. And so they said they'd pay, but I had to come along for the journey. And to be honest with you, I loved the relationship we had with those guys. And I thought, this is actually a really good opportunity. So after about 4 months, I decided to take on board an opportunity to help them roll this product and this concept out across New Zealand, Australia, and beyond. And it's been really interesting because opportunities present themselves. As a result of COVID, 70% of all the traditional hostels in New Zealand disappeared. Again, 90 to 100% of their revenue stopped, and they just couldn't survive. So I've got this opportunity now where there's a lot of demand and not a lot of supply. At the same time, we were building a flagship property in Auckland, and we started it just before COVID, and we just finished it about 2 months ago, and we rebranded it called Lylo, and it's phenomenal. I think it's, in my opinion, it's the best product in the world in terms of that sort of budget lifestyle accommodation offering. And it's just been so well received. We've sort of opened up on day one and we're at 90, 100% each night. And it's really, really bloody exciting. And it kind of gave me my mojo back to a certain degree, you know, as you go and you get on with it. So I've joined these guys up here, and that's been really good. One thing I did miss out and forget to mention was over that 4-month period where I stepped away, you know, you have all these romantic notions that you're just going to focus on yourself and you're going to get fit and you're going to sleep in, and I just so maybe it's just not my DNA. I just couldn't do that, but I needed to do something. So I've made a couple of girlfriends of mine who I went to school with, their husbands. They'd started up this really, really cool little online mattress business called Comfy during COVID. And it was all designed around, again, necessity. They couldn't buy beds during COVID. You couldn't get out, and they had 2 daughters that needed a bed and they couldn't buy it. And then they looked at the whole process and the whole journey of buying mattresses in big box retailers where everyone else is sat on the same bed and you can sit on it for 2 minutes and whatever. So they had this great idea, great concept. They just didn't really understand how to build a brand and how to create a social footprint and how to, you know. So I said I'd help them out, and I did that, and I was really excited about it. I've actually subsequently got involved from an equity position and having a blast for it. But it's actually been really, again, cathartic to do something which is totally outside of my norm, but to bring across all the other side. It's a social enterprise. So for every 5 beds that we sell, we give a full sleep solution to a New Zealand family. We just donated a whole bunch of beds to the flood relief. So we're doing all this really cool stuff as well as building a really commercial business. I call it my midlife crisis. You know, I probably can't afford the Porsche anymore, but I can definitely do a whole bunch of beds and social enterprises. So it's been really, really cool. So I did that, and then obviously my main focus now is on Lylo, and as I said, we've got the 3 properties in New Zealand, and we're building our first two in Australia at the moment, and the opportunity to do something really special in this space is really exciting. So yeah, so it's been a whirlwind journey in terms of getting to this point, both professionally and also personally as well. And I think that's the one thing that I've really taken away is you learn a lot through. I know everyone says it and it's a bit of a cliche, but you learn more through adversity than you do through success. And I really do believe that. It was funny, I remember through the darkest times, and there were some real dark times, 2 things I remember that I could really always guarantee that I'd do. One would be get out of bed in the morning. And that was really important, because I think if you start not getting out of bed or you start drinking before 10 in the morning, you're in real trouble. But I did that. I got out of bed every morning, which was really, really important. And that was something that I also when I was going through a really dark period, a friend of mine, and friends have been amazing, right? Friends are incredible, and you know who your real friends are. And I had a friend of mine who sent me a text, and he said a quote from Abraham Lincoln, and I'm not really one of those guys who always says quotes and inspirational quotes, but this really got to me. And it was a quote that said, "This too shall pass." And it was really important for me to remember that. And not only will the bad times pass, and they always do, and they do, but actually the good times will also pass as well. So you got to embrace the good and embrace the bad. And I think, and I live by that now. I think, you know, if the things are going really, really well, appreciate that they are, celebrate the hell out of it. And actually, you know, really embrace the fact that things are going well, but also understand that, you know, they think they can turn quickly. But also the shit stuff that happens, it can be shit today, but it can be okay tomorrow. So a few lessons that I learned, I wrote some of these down this morning because I just thought it'd be really, really, maybe for some of you guys who are in different stages of your journey, things are going well, things aren't going so well, you're a little bit lost or whatever. A couple of things that I'll just mention here. Growth is exciting, challenging, and rewarding, but big isn't always better. And I think we fell into the trap a little bit of just go big or go home. And maybe it's the arrogance of youth to a certain degree. You know, just go, oh, hell, you know, we're going so well. There's 100 vehicles, 200,000, 1,000. And actually, we also had a little business that we were part owners in called Lucky Campervans, which were these 2 young kids from Wellington in their 20s who went and bought 5 vehicles of us one summer, and then it came out next year and wanted to buy another 15. And I said, oh, look, we won't sell you those. So we don't want to build up a competitor, but why don't I give you 100 and we'll take 50% of your business? And we did. And they ended up running a business that ran about 400 camper vans. They only ran over summer. They snowboarded over winter. They made so much money out of it because they ran it as a low cost operation. It wasn't bigger, but it was probably better. So bigger is not necessarily always better. And I think that's really important. Capital intensive businesses need cash. They need to be fed. And I think that's something that there's nothing wrong with people. Some people get really put off by capital intensive businesses. I don't, but you also got to also understand that they require cash, right? And it's all good when things are going well. When the tap turns off, it gets really busy, gets really difficult. There's another quote which I think really sums it up. Banks give you an umbrella on a sunny day and take it away on a rainy one. And I think that's look, I don't blame our bank for what they went through. They were going through on multiple fronts there at the time. But you are really reliant on your funding partners, and it's all great when things are going well and things get a little bit difficult. It's a different conversation. So there are requirements. Funding is requirements, but just I suppose it's maybe spreading it out a little bit or having different ones is important. Culture is everything. I know you keep hearing in business. We had an incredible culture at JUCY. We loved our staff. They loved us. It was a real family environment, and that got us through huge amounts. And it got us through when we had to let people go on Zoom and Teams, and again, they were calling us up, going, "Tim, are you guys all right? Is everything okay?" And here's these people who have lost their jobs, or they have to go and find, or they've got families. But if you have a strong culture within a business, it's just everything. And we spend a huge amount of time. It's harder the bigger you get. I mean, when we had 10 people, we knew all of them. We knew their wives, we knew their girlfriends. Sometimes they had both. We knew them. We just knew everything, right? So but the bigger you get, 100 people, 200 people, you don't know everyone, but everyone knew us. And the way we did that was we got on planes, we went and saw places, we went to branches, but we did video, we used technology. So culture in a business is everything. Take a drink along the way, because the big event may not happen. I spent years telling my wife when I was traveling for 6-7 months of the year, don't worry, babe, the big event will happen. When I missed out on every parent teacher interview or every sports game, don't worry, the big event will happen. And then turn around and there's no big event, and it's a really difficult pill for someone to swallow when you keep telling that. So, and we didn't take a drink. We put everything we made, we put back in the business. It was a reoccurring grow. And in hindsight, which is a beautiful thing, you take a drink along the way because it's important that you do so. And so I'd always suggest that. Your kids know what's happening. I think I mentioned to you, it's really important that you just be honest with everyone. Don't dwell on the past, as there's fuck all you can do about it. And I think the one thing I wrote an article on LinkedIn, and it was called "Don't Look Back in Anger," and that's because I think social media is a brilliant tool, and I'm on most social platforms, but what it does do is it constantly reminds you of shit you've done in the past. And so you'd be sitting there, and I'll get this post in the middle of the darkest times going, "Do you remember 2 years ago when you opened the LA office? Or do you remember you did this?" And you just go, off, you get so pissed off by it because you're reminding of this thing, but you can't dwell on the past. I know it's really, really hard. I had the 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh God, I remember doing this or that. You can't do it. It's a really hard thing. It's an easy thing to say, really hard thing to do, but don't dwell on it. It's nothing you can do. Your reputation is your greatest asset. And I still really believe in that. Again, you try to do the best. If you're a good person, good things happen. And I do believe that. I know people talk about karma, etc. But if you're a good thing, and when we were going through the times that we went through, the fact that we were good people, the fact that we were trying like everything we could to get people through, it definitely paid off, and you realize that. And now you see it now, right? And so it's really important that you do that. So that's a bit you reap what you sow is probably another thing that I sort of believe in as well. Just be a good person, and good things will happen. No PGs. We were really lucky. We, about 4 years before COVID, we got out of basically every single PG that we had, which was really nice. It's been 20 years building up our business, and when you're capital intensive, funders and banks and stuff want you to do PGs, and so we did, and then we got out of most of them, which was really good. Drugs are okay. Pardon?
Can you say what a PG is?
Oh, personal grievance.
Oh, okay.
Not personal grievance. Personal guarantee.
Okay, yeah.
You don't want either one. You don't want either one. Yeah,
No.
personal grievances suck, and personal guarantees are worse. Drugs are okay if they help you to get through. And I think I mentioned it before. Even you do whatever you can. If you take this, don't be. There's nothing embarrassing. You just do whatever you can. Talk to people again. I found that really for me was really important. Just talk to people. People are going through, even if it's people not involved in our business. Help other people like I did with Comfy. It's just a really good way of taking your mind off it, which is good. Your mates are amazing and will stand by you through everything. And that's been the biggest thing, right? Is again, if your family and friends are great, your mates are amazing. They get around you and they just support you whenever you need. Find an avenue for your voice. Mine was social media, as I mentioned. And finally, you can stick pivot up your ass, because the word pivot, and everyone always does it, right? We had so many people say to us, I was like, our business, everyone stopped coming to New Zealand. They go, you should pivot. And I'm like, pivot to what? We've got hotels, tourist boats, and camper vans and cars. We've got a border which is fully closed. And you want us to pivot? I mean, I know that people were trying to do the right thing, but it was kind of ludicrous, really. In saying that, we definitely tried. We set up a competitor to Uber Eats, which was using our vehicles to deliver food to local restaurants. We did that. I think we did some other stuff that we got our development team to do some other work. We tried everything, but in the end of the day, we're a business that's reliant on 90% tourists, and they just didn't enter the country. So it's been a whirlwind adventure, but you come out the other side, and I'm really pleased to say, from both a JUCY perspective, my brother's going really well there. The original investor that came in is now out, and the irony is one of the original ones that we tried to get in, the PE firms, is now in, which is ironic. But in saying that, they're a great partner. They've put a shitload of capital in. They've just bought a whole bunch of motorhomes off THL, another big operator, and they'll go from strength to strength. And the business is rocking now that the borders are open, everything's back. So, you can sit there and go, oh, that kind of sucks, and it kind of doesn't, but it actually doesn't, because JUCY is the legacy, and I always wanted to do well. So that's great. Lylo for me is super bloody exciting. The mojo's back. There's just really cool shit happening, and you start thinking again, you see creating again, good stuff happens, which is cool. And then our other little businesses that we're involved in it's really cool to see little startups that you kick off and things are happening. So overall, it's been a hell of a journey in the last sort of two and a half years. But still here and still loving it. So that's my very, I suppose, interesting story for me. So any questions or anything? Yeah.
That was amazing. I didn't realize you'd already prepared a bunch of points to talk on and everything. Thank you. That was really really in depth. Really appreciate how you have talked a bit about the mental health battles, and honestly, it is so true. I mean, I know so many people that do go on like SSRIs every now and again, and it's kind of one of those things where if you get to that point where you do need to kind of reach out for help. Things like medicine, like that's totally fine. And I think it should be more normalized for people to go and get help when they need it, instead of just trying to push through and act like everything's okay. So I'm glad that in a way COVID has kind of brought that out a little bit, and people are able to be a little bit more vulnerable with how business can be tough and it can affect mental health. So yeah, I do appreciate you talking a bit on that. I've just got a question that's come through here from anonymous attendee. Great story and right indeed. How is the receivership process with the administrators and Polar Capital? Oh, I don't know how in depth you want to go into.
Okay, no, it's fine. I can totally do this. No, it was basically what they call a pre-pack. So the deal was done to buy the business. But as I said, there was the equity and the debt sort of at the same level. So it went through a process with them. There's always some negative connotations that come along with that, but it was a predetermined pre-pack arrangement. And tough to go through. I wasn't there at the time. I'd already sort of departed when that happened. But really, it was like anything. You never like to see these things happen, but but it's really how it bounces back, which I suppose makes a big difference. So, but yeah, still really, really tough.
Cool. Question from Helen. What is one thing you wish you could have done differently or earlier?
Yeah, Helen, it's a good question in the sense of I think what we could have done differently, what I could have done differently. You know, probably in hindsight, I mean, you can never predict, you know, certain things that happen in your life. But in saying that, we could have been, look, we could have been a bit more prepared. We could have had a bit more capital. We could have had a bit more. But again, when 90% of your business stops overnight, it's really, really hard to plan for that accordingly. What I would have done differently, maybe, you know, in a hindsight again, you know, we've had a few options to buy the business over the years, quite a few, and we've always said no, because we didn't really, I used to always laugh that my exit strategy was death, and it nearly ended up being that way, to be fair. But it was always that was always a thing. We never really thought about even not being involved in the business. So for us, it was it was a very, you know, we could have got out earlier, we could have sold part of it earlier, we could have taken on a partner, which maybe have helped us get through the really tough times. I don't know. Again, it's should have, would have, could have.
Yeah, no one could have predicted the pandemic. And I think like you were saying before, like good not to dwell too much on the past, but yeah, instead look towards the future, but also, you know, take in lessons where you can to improve in the future. But
yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, there's a hell of a lot of lessons that we could have done better. There's no question about it, right? There's a lot of stuff that we could have done better. But the irony is that the business will be a lot better business as a result. And I think there's a lot of businesses that have gone through COVID that will end up being a hell of a lot better as a result of going through what they've gone through, which seems stupid that it takes a global pandemic or a crisis or a tragedy to make things better. But maybe sometimes you just get a little bit, I don't know, lucky ways or whatever.
That word again. Yeah. I'm curious to chat more on, so currently like with Lylo. So I remember I came, stayed on when it first opened, and I was very surprised how busy it was, even though the bookings had like only just opened. So that was really cool to see the demand so high so quickly. So can you talk a bit on your growth plans for Lylo, and like what are the points of differences for people who, you know, haven't been there yet? What makes it different to a classic hostel?
Yeah, I mean, it was always sort of our vision that we wanted to, when we got into accommodation under JUCY Snooze, we kind of always, we were having these people on the road in our vehicles. They were saying, well, where do we stay? And we looked around the market and we thought that, you know, the hostel game in New Zealand is quite antiquated, and globally in the US, and so more so in the UK, Europe, there was sort of this new move to like a flash packers or this new sort of designer type hostel offering. And so we kind of got the idea, and when we first did Cook Street, where we're located now, we started the planning for this before COVID. It took us 4 years to do it. And so we kind of wanted to create this incredible new type of offering that hadn't been done before, you know, and incorporate things like, you know, co-working, which is really important, leisure, which is, you know, people will come for a month, stay with us, live in Byron Bay for a month, basically do what you're doing now, right? Go to different parts of the world and work. And so, and we wanted, and food and beverage was really important to us. And we kind of designed it originally to do this. And then as a result of what we've been through and with COVID and everything else, we've kind of adapted that design accordingly. But it's a 300 beds. It's got these amazing little capsules, pods. We have ensuite rooms, we have double rooms. We have a food and beverage place called Miss Lucy's, which is very cool. Everything on tap, cocktails, really inexpensive, kind of catering towards that traditional 18 to 35. But what's been really blown us away is that we're getting it's such a broad range of customers. There's just no, and as you said, we started off, and we probably got benefit the fact that there wasn't so much of the competition had tragically gone as a result of COVID. But you know, that's enabled us to, you know, to start and to hit the ground running, which has been really positive, and it's given us the confidence to now go, great, where to next? And as I said, we've got a couple of projects in Australia at the moment, and we're really trying to take this product, and I'm really fortunate to have the EVT guys with us. We got involved with them at the start because they know they've got 80 odd hotels, and they know, and they've got a good balance sheet to grow. They've got a desire to grow. and they've been amazing. So for us, it's really, we want to be that leading operator of this budget lifestyle accommodation offering. It's weird calling it a hostel because I don't know, when you walk in it, it's just doesn't, hostel's got a bit of a dirty word, it just doesn't really seem like a hostel.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I never know quite what to say when I'm trying to describe it to someone. Like it's kind of like a hostel, but it's a pod. But there's also like hotel-like rooms. It's a bit of a mix of everything. That's super cool. Yeah, I'm really excited to see the growth happen there, and hopefully, I mean, I can definitely see it even here in the States would be great. Looking for cheaper options is tricky. So definitely need it here, but yeah, Australia I think is a good next country to head to there. Just a quick note for those listening, if you do have any questions, type those in the Q&A or the chat box, and I'm just keeping an eye on those. We've got up to 15 minutes longer, so if there are any burning questions, now is the time to shoot those through. I wanted to touch on, you talked a little bit about how there's something that I've been hearing lately is from founders learning a bit more about sort of having a sustainable business, in the sense that it shouldn't all just be about raise a ton of money, have the highest valuation, hire the most staff as fast as you can, because in that process, when you go so crazy and intense like that, you burn out quickly. Processes aren't done properly and everything can just get messy. And whereas I do see this growing trend of people realizing it's more important to build a business around what's more comfortable, like what you can actually sustain. Not hire too fast when you're not ready, or not raise capital if you're not quite ready for that yet. So I did love, you kind of mentioned something about that at the start, but I just thought I'd say that notice that trend as well. People realizing it's not just about becoming $1 billion business.
I think you have these as a sort of alluded to, look, we grew very fast, probably not like we were 18 years or something in our business, so we kind of, it was a gradual to a certain degree, but maybe the last sort of 5 to 6 years before that was really, really quite quick. And look, you get, it's very hard to say no when opportunities come up, right? And you go, this customer comes to you and goes, we want to put X amount of $1 million of customers through, and you go, great, we'll just build some more vehicles, we'll just do that. You run it high, and it's a bit like Lylo now, right? Like we could, we're running at 90-odd%. It's great. We've got where I'm based at the moment, our top floor is vacant at the moment because it was going to be the JUCY office, and now obviously there's no more people, but the whole floor is vacant and it's got the best views of Auckland, looks right out over. And we're sitting there now going, shit, if we had 150 more pods or more rooms, and we could, we should be building, let's do it, this. But actually I'm sitting there going, actually let's just take a breath, let's just accept that what we're doing at the moment is going really, really well, and let's plan and see what is the best use of that space from an accommodation perspective, and we don't necessarily need to rush into it. And I think that's what I kind of got a little bit from the event guys as well. They take a really long, this is a 100-plus-year-old business, right? They take a long-term view on stuff, and actually, as I was mentioned before, big is not necessarily always better, and quick is not always better. Actually take a longer-term view. And I think sometimes we've, in the last 5-10 years, especially in the tech phase, and especially where you are now in Colorado, or we're in Silicon Valley, in these places, it's all about grow really, really fast, get really, really high valuations, and that's been a bit of a model, right? So, and that's been great. A lot of people made a lot of money, and they've done very well. I think the idea of a sustainable business, I think the real tragedy a little bit in New Zealand to a certain degree is there's just not a lot of generational businesses. Like, where are the old school generational businesses? They're just not there anymore. And I think a lot of it's got to do with the fact that people have a lot more choices, right? You just don't go and do what dad's doing. But also maybe it's a bit of a shame it's not.
True. I mean, that could also be down to the fact that, as you'll see with a lot of old businesses, they don't want to change the way that they do things, so they end up slowly dying out when they don't realize it's just because maybe they need to hire some young people that can actually see what's going on and change the way that they do business.
It's a good point. Yeah, totally.
I think a question's just come through. Okay, question around government. Ben saying, not wanting this to be political, but do you think there's anything the government could have done to support your business? Or was the pandemic effectively a worst case scenario that the business just couldn't recover from?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think at the time, the government, I mean, this is, look, everyone has their own political views and what they believe is, I mean, I went through a phase of being quite negative on our response because, I mean, you close the borders down for a couple of years and that basically turns off all of tourism, right? And so that's really that you go, why would we do that? And now we're finding we don't necessarily need to have done it, but that was a decision that was made. The government tried to put in some support and some grants, but then they did some individual ones with other big tourism companies, and that was like, really, you've done some for some and not for others. So that wasn't good. And look, if we got some of the money that maybe some of the other companies had done, then maybe it might have been a slightly different story. But again, I think this was foreign ground for everyone, and I don't think necessarily the focus on tourism was great enough. I mean, a lot was going on, but before COVID, it was the largest export earner in the country, and employed the most people, and so it's and I think I laugh though, the government came out and they had this new strategy for tourism, and they wanted to get rid of, they wanted to focus on the high spending tourists, basically. So gone are not gone, but they didn't necessarily want to focus on the backpacker market, the youth market. And I was more pissed off about that, really, because what they failed to realize is that this market, our clientele, will be the ones that come back in 20 years' time with their families. Our clientele, before COVID, anyone under 35 actually spend more on average than anyone over 35 because they just come for longer. They get out in the regions, they do things. So there's a little bit of miscommunication. So to answer along, and I probably have just dragged on a little bit in terms of answering the question, Ben, but no, I think there's more stuff that could have been done, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's very hard for a government to support an industry which everyone is on their knees, basically. And we weren't publicly listed. We couldn't go and raise capital. When we did, we had to do it in probably the worst conditions we've ever done.
Curious on that. What are your thoughts on tourism in New Zealand in the next couple of years? Like, I know it's definitely obviously on the rise, but yeah, just curious if there's anything you've noticed, or any trends you see happening in the tourism space.
There is. I think in terms of, I think New Zealand is, right now it's really hot, right? Like you can't get a car rental, can't get a rental car, can't get a hotel, can't get anything. I think we're about 8 weeks behind Australia. That's kind of how we work it in terms of the demand. So we saw this coming. I think New Zealand has a potential to have a crisis of quality, because I think what's happened is that no one's been able to reinvest in fleet, whether it's buses or planes or cars or whatever. So you've got lots of people coming down here and wanting to spend big money, and spending big money and not necessarily getting the right experience and product. I think we lost a lot of people out of the industry, which meant the talent pool had gone. So you've got that's a quality issue as well. So I don't think demand's going to be our issue. I think there's going to be lots of demand. I think the problem we're going to have is the ability to service that demand. Yes. I hope that everyone has a good summer and they're able to go ahead and put on newer product, etc. But when I look at our product in Auckland, and we're fortunate, it's brand new, it looks amazing, and the experience has been really great. But we have a lot of people who come and stay with us, and then because we're a little bit more expensive, and they'll go somewhere else, and they'll come back straight away and go, oh God, we can't stay. And they show you where they're staying, and you go, God, it's just such a bad look for the industry that there's just some of these horrible, and I don't blame the people because they've had no money to invest in it. So that's where I think we've got a slight reputational concern there. But yeah, it'll be next couple of years, I think will be very good for New Zealand tourism.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's interesting. That kind of makes me think of how, like, down in Queenstown right now, they can't even get staff to clean hotel rooms because there's nowhere for the staff to live because it's too many tourists near Airbnbs.
We have 18 staff living with us in Queenstown from different age, different places. Like you can't get it. And so people who go to Queenstown and you go into a restaurant and it's half full, and you go, oh great, can I get a table? And they go, oh no, we can't serve you. We're only running at half capacity. And you go, holy shit.
So
Yeah,
love Queenstown, but yeah, they need to figure out some things down there.
they do.
Question here from Anonymous. How do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years' time? Do you still be in the tourism accommodation industry? The question here was Lylo sold to Centuria or another potential acquirer as an exit strategy? But I think it was EVT.
Yeah, Centuria is the owner of our property in Auckland, which we're under contract to buy at the moment. But yeah, no, it's first question, where do I think I'll be in 5 years' time? Yeah, it's good. I'm pretty committed to this journey with Lylo, and I think, and I've sort of given myself, your internal sort of 5-year period to really take this thing and grow it and really take it to where I think it can go. So I'm really excited about that. I think it's it's got huge potential, both in terms of from New Zealand, but also Australia and beyond. And I'm really fortunate to have a really good partner who wants to grow and wants to take it and sees the opportunity and the potential as well. So I see myself in 5 years' time rolling this stuff out and then reassessing. I think I used to travel about 4 to 6 months a year. I haven't been doing that, and that's been actually really it's been great on one hand, and it's also been a bit weird on the other. But so I've been able to sort of spend a bit more time on other things outside of work, and that's been really, really good, because again, you don't realize how much you're involved in when your life. And I used to always say there was no work-life balance, right? Because it's another cliche, but it really wasn't work to me and so it was kind of like, this is just all encompassing. But now I'm sleeping better and doing a few more things, which is cool.
Totally. No, good answer. What do you do for fun? What do you do to kind of keep your head in the right space these days? Have you, because you mentioned you've kind of separated work from family life a bit more, and I can see the posters in the background. I'm guessing you might be in a movie.
Oh, no, I'm actually today I'm based down at the event office, cinemas offices. So that's why I'm there. So yeah, what I do, I was up until recently playing quite a bit of golf with friends, but I've just fallen out of love with it because it hates me and I'm not very good at it, and it's sort of kicking my ass. Mm-hmm. So, but I'll get back into that. I spend a lot more time with kids, with friends and family. Just trying to do a bit more stuff, and just in terms of with them, which it's kind of a little bit like making up time to a certain degree, and I've been really enjoying that. In saying that, we've actually been really, really busy, and there's lots of stuff happening. So it's been quite a lot of it's been work related. But again, it's I took some time off last month and went down and watched my son play cricket. It's stuff that I'd never really do before. And do I regret that I didn't do it before? Yeah, maybe I do. I mean, I feel for my oldest daughter, who I didn't really do a lot of stuff when she was around, and the youngest one I'm doing a lot more with. So that's been, but you never know these things, and you learn as you go along. And if someone had told me 5 years ago, you need to be doing this and not doing so much and doing that, I'd say to them, oh, I've got plenty of time to do that once this journey's over. So yeah, it's a good lesson in life.
Yeah, cool. Let's wrap up. But thank you so much, Tim, for coming and sharing a bit about the real journey of the past couple of years, and super exciting to see what's happening with Lylo. And I'll definitely, hope to stay in the ones that open up soon myself. And thank you everyone who's tuned in. This has hopefully been recorded, so I will chuck it up on our YouTube, LinkedIn, website, and everything within a couple of hours. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and big thank you, Tim, for coming in.
Nice to see you guys. Thank you for the opportunity. Cheers.